corrupted by democracy and Jewish influence. Such a society, in Nazi thinking, might have raw resources, but it could never match German technical and organizational superiority. Canaris tried to push back. He brought forward specific intelligence, the photographs of construction at Willow Run, the intercepted communications about production schedules, the testimony of multiple independent sources. Göring wouldn't hear it. To accept Abwehr's findings would be to admit that his entire understanding of air power was wrong, that the Luftwaffe, which he had promised would make Germany invincible, was about to be swept from the skies by an industrial force he hadn't anticipated. So the report was filed away, dismissed as defeatist thinking. Canaris was told, not too subtly, that German intelligence should focus on finding weaknesses in the enemy, not spreading panic with inflated production figures. But Canaris wasn't done. He requested a meeting at the highest level. He needed to get this information to Adolf Hitler himself. Perhaps the Führer, confronted with the facts, would understand the strategic reality. Getting accurate information to Hitler was nearly impossible by 1943. The Führer lived in an increasingly paranoid bubble, surrounded by yes-men who told him what he wanted to hear. Bad news was often suppressed by subordinates who feared Hitler's rage. The atmosphere in Hitler's headquarters, whether at the Berghof in Bavaria or the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia, was one of total unreality. Hitler had convinced himself that the war was ultimately a test of will, that German superiority, both racial and spiritual, would overcome any material disadvantage. He spoke constantly of wonder weapons that would turn the tide, of secret technologies that would render Allied advantages meaningless. When confronted with the Abwehr's intelligence on American production, Hitler's reaction made Göring look reasonable by comparison. The numbers, Hitler declared, were obvious fabrications, Jewish propaganda designed to undermine German morale. The Americans, he insisted, were incapable of such industrial organization. Their society was too divided, too corrupt, too weak. He pointed to the American performance in World War I, where it had taken them over a year to deploy significant forces to Europe. He cited pre-war intelligence assessments that had accurately described the small size of the American military in 1941. None of those assessments had anticipated this level of industrial mobilization. But rather than update his understanding based on new information, Hitler simply rejected the new information. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, and one of the few Nazi leaders who actually understood industrial production, was present for some of these discussions. After the war, in Allied interrogations, Speer admitted that he had known the truth. He had seen intelligence. He had done his own calculations. If the American production figures were even half of what the Abwehr claimed, Germany was doomed. There was no way to match that level of output. But to say this to Hitler in 1943 would have been suicidal. So Speer stayed silent, as did most of the others who knew the truth. The report that Canaris had worked so hard to deliver, that represented the dangerous work of dozens of agents in the field, was rejected. Not analyzed and found wanting. Not disputed with counter-evidence. Simply rejected because it contradicted Nazi ideology. This was perhaps the Nazi regime's greatest intelligence failure of the war. They had the information. Their spies had done their jobs brilliantly. But the system was incapable of processing information that contradicted the leadership's worldview. And so, the truth was buried. the warning was ignored. The agents who had risked their lives to gather this intelligence had done so in vain. While German leaders were dismissing the Abwehr's reports as propaganda, the impossible was becoming real on a stretch of farmland outside Detroit, Michigan. Willow Run was unlike anything that had ever been built. The main assembly building, designed by industrial architect Albert Kahn, was quite literally the largest room ever constructed. It stretched for over half a mile under a single roof. The building covered over 3.5 million square feet. To put that in perspective, you could fit the entire Pentagon inside it, with room to spare. The assembly line itself was an engineering marvel. To avoid crossing county lines and paying taxes in 2 jurisdictions, the line had to make a 90-degree turn midway through the building. Engineers designed massive turntables that could rotate partially completed bombers, maintaining the flow of production while satisfying legal requirements. This became known as the tax turn, a uniquely American solution to a uniquely American problem. But the real revolution at Willow Run wasn't the size of the building. It was the philosophy behind it. Henry Ford and his production chief, Charles Sorensen, had promised something that aircraft industry experts said was impossible. They would build bombers the same way they built cars. Traditional aircraft manufacturing was a craft process. Skilled workers assembled each plane individually, hand-fitting parts, making adjustments, solving problems on the fly. It was slow, labor-intensive, and required highly trained personnel. Ford's vision was different. Break the bomber down into sub-assemblies. Design specialized tools and jigs for each component. Train workers to perform single, repetitive tasks with maximum efficiency. Create a moving assembly line where the aircraft came to the workers, not the other way around. The aircraft industry establishment thought Ford was insane. One executive famously quipped, "You can't expect a blacksmith to make a watch overnight." But Ford and Sorensen proceeded anyway. They deconstructed the B-24 into its component systems: wings, fuselage sections, engine mounts, landing gear. Each became a separate assembly line feeding into the main production flow. They created an apprentice school at the plant that could take someone with no manufacturing experience and, in a matter of weeks, train them to perform their specific task with precision. And who were these workers? They represented everything the Nazi ideology said was impossible. At peak production, Willow Run employed over 42,000 people. Nearly a third of them were women. Not secretaries or clerks, but production workers, operating rivet guns, welding torches, precision machinery. One of these women, Rose Will Monroe, would become the real-life inspiration for the Rosie the Riveter propaganda character. Over 9% of the workforce was African American, working in positions of genuine skill and responsibility. 3% were classified as disabled, given jobs modified to their capabilities. The plant operated in shifts, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. This diverse workforce, this mongrel society that Nazi propaganda mocked, was about to demonstrate what democratic industrial mobilization could achieve. The early months were rough. The first B-24 rolled out in September 1942 and immediately had to be completely rebuilt due to quality problems. Defect rates hit 50%. Production in early 1943 was just a handful of aircraft per month, nowhere near the projections. Critics called it "Will It Run" instead of "Willow Run." But the Ford engineers kept refining the process. They developed new hydraulic riveting tools that worked faster and more accurately. They created prefabricated wiring harnesses that could be installed as complete units. They designed fixtures that allowed workers to access every part of the aircraft without awkward positioning. By mid-1943, the system was working. Production rose to over 100 aircraft per month. By December, it hit 300. In April 1944, Willow Run produced 428 B-24 Liberators. That's one complete bomber every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. The German intelligence report from March 1943 hadn't been propaganda. If anything, it had underestimated what the Americans would achieve. This single factory, dismissed by Göring and Hitler as impossible, was now producing more four-engine bombers per month than the entire German aviation industry. The consequences of German leadership's denial began to manifest in the skies over Europe. Throughout 1943, American bomber raids had been relatively small. A few dozen aircraft here and there, testing defenses, learning tactics. German fighter pilots, experienced and skilled, had handled them relatively easily. But in late 1943 and early 1944, everything changed. The trickle of bombers became a flood. The 8th Air Force, based in England, began launching raids with hundreds of aircraft. The 15th Air Force, operating from Italy, added hundreds more. And at the heart of these formations were B-24 Liberators from Willow Run. In February 1944, the Allies launched Big Week, a coordinated assault on German aircraft production. For 7 days, American bombers, escorted by long-range fighters, pounded German factories and was systematically destroyed. The Germans shot down dozens of bombers, but for every aircraft lost, 2 more appeared from American factories. The math that Canaris had tried to explain to Hitler was now being demonstrated in blood and fire. German pilots, no matter how brave or skilled, were fighting against an enemy that could replace losses faster than they could inflict them. Major Johannes Steinhoff, commanding a Luftwaffe fighter group, wrote in his diary, "Every day there are more of them. We shoot down 10 and 20 appear the next day. Our replacement pilots arrive with minimal training. Theirs arrive as well trained as their veterans. This is not a war we can win." By mid-1944, the bombing campaign had achieved something the German leadership thought impossible. They had achieved air superiority over Germany itself. The mighty Luftwaffe, which had terrorized Europe in the early war years, was being ground down to nothing. Not because German pilots lacked courage, not because German aircraft were inferior, but because American factories were producing aircraft faster than German pilots could shoot them down. And the worst part for Germany was that this was just one factory, producing one type of aircraft. Across the United States, dozens of other factories were producing fighters, medium bombers, and transport aircraft. Boeing in Seattle was building B-17 flying fortresses. Douglas in California was building dive bombers and transports. North American was producing P-51 Mustang fighters by the thousands. Consolidated, which designed the B-24, was building them at other facilities. The total American aircraft production in 1944 would reach 96,000 aircraft. In that single year, America produced more military aircraft than Germany had produced during the entire war to that point. But what happened to the man who tried to warn them? Admiral Wilhelm Canaris paid a terrible price for being right. As the war turned against Germany, Canaris's accurate warnings marked him as suspect in Nazi eyes. His rivals in the SS, Heinrich Himmler's security service, had always viewed the Abwehr with suspicion. They saw the old-line military officers as insufficiently devoted to Nazi ideology. After the failed assassination attempt on Hitler in July 1944, the SS investigation uncovered evidence that Canaris had been involved in resistance activities. He had used the Abwehr to shelter opponents of the regime. He had sabotaged German war efforts in subtle ways. His accurate reports on American production weren't seen as good intelligence work. They were seen as proof of his defeatist, possibly treasonous mindset. Canaris was arrested in July 1944. For months, he was interrogated by the Gestapo. His personal diaries were discovered, revealing the depth of his opposition to Hitler's regime. On April 9, 1945, just weeks before Germany's final surrender, Canaris was executed at Flossenbürg concentration camp. He was stripped naked and slowly strangled with piano wire, a method designed to maximize suffering. The man who had seen the truth, who had tried to warn his nation about the coming catastrophe, was knowing that his warnings had been ignored, knowing that Germany was about to be crushed by exactly the industrial avalanche he had predicted. When the war finally ended in May 1945, the final accounting proved just how accurate Canaris's March 1943 report had been. Willow Run alone had produced almost 7,000 complete B-24 bombers, plus thousands of additional component kits. The United States had manufactured over 18,000 B-24s total across all factories. In total, from 1940 to 1945, America produced approximately 300,000 military aircraft. Germany, over the same period, managed about 94,000. It wasn't even close. A single American factory had outproduced significant portions of the entire German aviation industry. But the disparity went beyond just numbers. American aircraft were technologically sophisticated, well-equipped, reliable. German aircraft, by late in the war, were often assembled by slave laborers in underground facilities, using inferior materials, with quality control that had completely collapsed. The contrast extended to every aspect of the war effort. American logistics could supply armies thousands of miles from home while maintaining domestic prosperity. German logistics struggled to supply armies a few hundred miles from their borders. American industry could mass-produce complex weapons while continuously improving them based on combat feedback. German industry produced weapons designed by geniuses but manufactured in quantities too small to matter. The story of March 17, 1943, and the intelligence report that predicted all of this is more than just a historical footnote. It's a case study in how ideological blindness can lead to catastrophic strategic failure. The Nazi leadership didn't lose the war because they lacked information. Their intelligence service had given them accurate assessments of American industrial capability. They lost because they couldn't accept information that contradicted their core beliefs. They had built an entire worldview on the assumption of German racial and cultural superiority. When presented with evidence that their supposedly inferior enemies were outproducing them by factors of 5 to 1 or more, they simply couldn't process it. So they rejected it. They called it propaganda, defeatism, and lies. This cognitive failure wasn't unique to a few individuals. It permeated the entire Nazi leadership. From Hitler down through Göring, through the various military commanders, the pattern was the same. Rather than adapt to reality, they denied reality. They continued making strategic decisions based on what they believed should be true, rather than what actually was true. They had proved that a free, diverse society, when united in common cause, could mobilize industrial power on a scale that totalitarianism couldn't match. The very diversity that Nazis saw as weakness turned out to be strength. Different perspectives, different backgrounds, all contributing to a common effort. Meanwhile, Germany's reliance on slave labor in the late war years proved catastrophically counterproductive. Slaves sabotaged what they built. They worked slowly. They couldn't innovate or suggest improvements. The German underground factories, built with enormous effort and suffering, produced less than above-ground American factories operating with free workers. The Willow Run story also demonstrates something about the nature of modern warfare. The decisive weapons aren't always the ones that seem most impressive. Germany developed jet fighters, ballistic missiles, and rocket planes, all technologically ahead of anything the Allies had. But these wonder weapons came too late and in too few numbers. They were brilliantly designed weapons without the industrial base to produce them in meaningful quantities. America, by contrast, focused on weapons that were good enough and could be mass-produced. The B-24 wasn't as advanced as some German aircraft designs, but there were 18,000 of them. The Sherman tank wasn't as powerful as German Panthers or Tigers, but America built 50,000 Shermans. In modern warfare, quantity has a quality all its own. The side that can field adequate weapons in overwhelming numbers will defeat the side that fields small numbers of superior weapons. Today, the story of March 17, 1943, and Admiral Canaris's intelligence report should serve as a warning. It's a reminder that the most dangerous enemy in strategic planning isn't the adversary across the battlefield. It's the comfortable assumptions we make about ourselves and our opponents. The Nazis lost not because they were stupid or cowardly. They lost because they were trapped in an ideological framework that made them unable to accurately assess reality. They saw what they expected to see, rather than what actually was. In our own time, with our own challenges, the lesson remains relevant. Whether in business, politics, military planning, or any other field where decisions matter, we need to be able to accept information that contradicts what we want to believe. We need intelligence services that can tell uncomfortable truths. We need leaders who can hear those truths without shooting the messenger. We need institutions that can adapt to changing realities rather than denying them. The German spies who gathered the intelligence about Willow Run did their jobs perfectly. The analysts who compiled the March 17th report did their jobs perfectly. Admiral Canaris, in trying to get that information to decision-makers, did his job perfectly. The system failed not because of bad intelligence, but because of bad leadership. Leaders who valued ideological purity over strategic reality, who surrounded themselves with yes-men rather than truth-tellers, who chose comforting lies over uncomfortable facts. And so, on March 17, 1943, the truth arrived in Berlin. A simple intelligence report describing a factory in Michigan. The numbers on that page were accurate. The analysis was sound. The implications were clear. Germany was about to be buried under an avalanche of American production. The spies knew it. The analysts knew it. Canaris knew it. But the people with the power to act on that knowledge refused to believe it. They laughed at the impossible factory. They dismissed the inflated numbers. They rejected the mathematical certainty of defeat. And in doing so, they sealed their nation's fate. The war was lost that day, in a quiet office in Berlin, though it would take 2 more years, 20 more years, to prove that the Germans would never surrender. The German people, and millions more deaths before everyone else realized it.